Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Reborn in Highschool DxD as a Lucifuge. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 211, the final master turns out to be Ilya, bringing the Holy Grail War to a complete end. The homunculi created by the Einsteins had significant flaws, the most significant being their short lifespans. After 10 years, only a few members of the Einstein family remained. The current head of the family was kneeling before a young girl in the castle. The girl had long white hair and ruby-red eyes. She was Ilya. Due to Ilya's intervention, Ilya had been summoned from a parallel world and had become the master of Berserker, Heracles. Ilya had summoned Ilya because she realized that Irisfeel was no longer suitable as the Lesser Grail. Ilya, newly summoned, was confused about her situation. But upon returning to the Einstein castle, she realized that this wasn't the world she knew. The events of this world were completely different from her memories. According to the current Einstein head, their family's cloning techniques had been destroyed 10 years ago by an intruder who had also taken Irisfeel away. If the Fourth Holy Grail War hadn't happened, Irisfeel might still be alive. Ilya was overjoyed to learn that her mother might still be alive. She had no interest in the Holy Grail War and didn't care about the battles taking place in Fuyuki City. All she wanted was to find Irisfeel. But the Einstein family was in decline and couldn't help her. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared in the hall, catching Ilya's attention. A group of people emerged from the circle. Berserker! Ilya called out. A towering figure appeared beside her. It was Berserker, Heracles, Ilya's servant. Roy and the others were stunned when they saw the hulking figure. Was this Berserker, Heracles? Then, who was his master? Roy looked behind Berserker and saw a little girl with white hair sitting on a chair. Ilya, he exclaimed in surprise. He hadn't expected Ilya to be the master of Berserker. What was going on? He had destroyed the Einstein's cloning technology, and Irisfeel had been with him all along. How could Ilya still exist? Do you know me? Ilya asked curiously, tilting her head. Ilya, don't worry about how I know you. Can you tell me how you ended up here? You shouldn't exist in this world, Roy asked, confused. I don't know. I just woke up here, Ilya replied with a shrug. Then, she suddenly noticed Irisfeel behind Roy and her eyes widened. Mama, she cried, rushing towards Irisfeel and hugging her tightly. Mama? Irisfeel was bewildered. When did she have a child? Sakura, Rin, and the others were also confused. They didn't know Roy had a child. They assumed that Irisfeel was Roy's wife, so Ilya must be his daughter. Royoni-chan, what's going on? Irisfeel asked, looking at Roy with a puzzled expression. Ilya, you said you suddenly appeared in this world. So, in your original world, Irisfeel is already dead, right? Roy asked, stroking his chin thoughtfully. Yes, Ilya confirmed. Roy finally understood. Ilya must have summoned Ilya from a parallel world where Irisfeel had died. Was it to replace Irisfeel as the Lesser Grail? He instantly saw through Ilya's intentions. Irisfeel, don't worry. Ilya is your daughter from a parallel world, he explained. Parallel world? The girls were confused. Roy had mentioned parallel worlds before, but they hadn't expected someone from a parallel world to be summoned here. She really does look like Irisfeel, Sakura commented, observing the mother and daughter embracing. So she's not Roy's daughter. Sakura and Rin sighed in relief. Ilya was also surprised to hear the term parallel world, but she didn't care. As long as her mother was real, it didn't matter if she was from a different world. Irisfeel didn't quite understand the concept of parallel worlds, but she was delighted to meet her daughter from another world and hugged her tightly. Roy watched them with a thoughtful expression. He suddenly had a bold idea. But first, he had to deal with the last remaining issue. The Greater Grail. Once it was destroyed, the Holy Grail War would truly be over. Sakura, Irisville, you two go back first. We're going to destroy the Greater Grail and end this war, Roy instructed. Okay, Sakura replied with a nod. Roy opened a portal for them, sending everyone back except for himself and Artoria. Let's go, Artoria. It's time to end this, Roy said, offering his hand to Artoria. Artoria hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his, a smile gracing her lips. After the Holy Grail War ended, Roy would find a way to save her country. But she would also have to become his queen. She blushed at the thought. Roy activated the portal, and they reappeared in the underground chamber beneath Ryudu Temple. Roy, do we just need to destroy this magic circle? Artoria asked. Yes. Then allow me. Artoria drew Excalibur, preparing to unleash her noble phantasm. Roy didn't stop her. A brilliant beam of light engulfed the magic circle, destroying it completely. But this only stopped the Greater Grail from absorbing more magical energy. The Grail itself still existed. As the magic circle crumbled, countless fleshy tendrils emerged from the void, and black mud oozed out. What is that? Artoria frowned. That's the black mud formed from the curse within the Greater Grail, Roy explained, then waved his hand, freezing the mud and the tendrils. Absolute zero. This technique could eradicate any form of life. Roy snapped his fingers. Snap. The ice shattered, completely destroying the black mud and the tendrils. All right, let's go. Roy took Artoria's hand and teleported them back to the mansion. Royoni-chan, did you destroy the Greater Grail? Sakura asked as they returned. Yes, I did, Roy confirmed. Medusa, Medea, and the other servants fell silent. Without the Greater Grail, they would be summoned back to the Throne of Heroes. But Master, I don't want to leave you. Tamamonome suddenly cried, clinging to Roy with tears in her eyes. Why would you leave? I haven't allowed you to leave, Roy said, confused. But aren't we going to be summoned back to the Throne of Heroes? Don't worry. As long as you have bodies, you won't be summoned back, Roy explained. He had already thought of a solution to this problem. Bodies? How? Tamamonome was confused. Just become my servants, everyone, come here. I'll perform the devil transformation ritual, Roy said. Sakura and Irisville immediately stepped forward. They would never leave Roy. Ilya also joined them. Then, Artoria, Saber Alter, Dark Jean, Ruler Jean, Tamamonome, Okita Suji, Mash. They all gathered around Roy. Only Rin and Ishtar remained where they were. Master, aren't you going? Ishtar asked Rin. Oh, of course not. I have nothing to do with him. Rin replied, turning away with a blush. She wanted to join them, but she was too embarrassed. Then I'll go. Without the Greater Grail, I'll be summoned back to the Throne of Heroes soon, and I don't want that, Ishtar declared, joining the others. Rin stamped her foot in frustration. Roy, seeing her hesitation, used his magic to pull her over. Why are you being so tsundere? You're my exclusive. He teased. What do you mean by exclusive? Rin demanded, her face burning red. Heh, you'll find out later, Roy replied with a suggestive grin, making Rin's heart pound with anxiety. Chapter 212, Gaia and Alea, two little Lolas become subordinates. Roy waved his hand, and several evil pieces flew towards the girls. The devil transformation ritual began. He was transforming them all at once. Roy was a bit surprised that Irisville, who was already a devil, had also joined the ritual. Silly girl, he thought with a chuckle. Soon, the ritual was complete. Although he had gained many new servants, his power didn't increase significantly. But he was satisfied with his harvest in this world. And now that they were all his servants, it would be a waste not to enjoy them. That night, after feeding Sakura, Rin finally arrived. Roy glared at her. "Rin, why are you so late? Look, Sakura has already fainted." Rin rolled her eyes. Was it her fault? Roy didn't wait for her response and pulled her into a passionate embrace. After taking care of Rin, he moved on to Saber Alter and Artoria, then Dark Jean and Ruler Jean. He spent several days training them all. Having promised to help Artoria save Britain, Roy was a man of his word. After resting for half a month, he decided to fulfill his promise. To reach Artoria's parallel world, he needed Aleya's help. And to get Aleya's help, he simply needed to threaten her. He flew high into the sky and unleashed his magic power, enveloping the entire world. The world was under his control. With a single thought, he could destroy it completely. He was using the planet as a hostage to force Aleya to appear. "Aleya, aren't you coming out yet?" he taunted, looking at the empty sky with a confident smirk. But there was no response. "If you don't show yourself, I'll destroy this planet. And you'll disappear along with it," Roy threatened. Suddenly, two little girls appeared in the sky. They were incredibly cute, but their expressionless faces were a bit disappointing. "Destroyer from another world, what do you want?" Aleya asked in a flat tone. "Destroyer? But I haven't destroyed this world, have I?" Roy retorted. "You disrupted the Holy Grail War," Aleya accused. As the counterforce that protected humanity, she was not happy about Roy's interference. "And you're a threat to this planet," Gaia added. As the counterforce that protected the planet, she would appear whenever there was a threat to its existence. "That's true," Roy admitted with a shrug. "But you can't do anything to me, can you?" Gaia and Aleya remained silent. They couldn't harm him. As the consciousness of the planet, they couldn't directly intervene. Their only means of defense, the heroic spirit summoning system, was useless against him. In fact, it had only benefited him. They couldn't think of any way to defeat him. Roy smirked, seeing their silence. Then, an idea struck him. He would turn these two little girls into his servants. The evil pieces given to him by the system were special. They could be used to reincarnate even the most powerful beings into devils, increasing their power in the process. That's why he had this idea. "What are you planning to do?" Aleya asked. It's quite simple," Roy replied, taking out two evil pieces and offering them to the girls. "What are these?" Gaia asked, tilting her head. "These are called evil pieces. All you have to do is accept their power," Roy explained with a smile. "Become devils?" "That's impossible," Aleya said. She knew about devils, but turning her, the collective consciousness of humanity, into a devil was unthinkable. "Let's find out," Roy challenged. Aleya hesitated for a moment, looking at the evil piece in her hand, then merged it with her body. A tremendous power surged from her, threatening to engulf the entire planet. As the collective will of humanity, Aleya's power was unimaginable. As a formless consciousness, she hadn't displayed her true power before. But now, as she transformed into a devil, her power was unleashed. Aleya, now a devil, quickly regained control of her power. Roy was surprised to find that she possessed power comparable to a planetary being, but it made sense. As the consciousness of humanity in the Fate world, it would be strange if she wasn't at least a planetary being. And thanks to Aleya's feedback, his power also increased slightly. "How do you feel?" Roy asked, amused by Aleya's fascination with her new body. Aleya's expression was no longer blank. It was filled with curiosity. "It's amazing. Is this what it feels like to have a body?" she wondered. As the consciousness of humanity, she had never had a physical form, nor a gender. Her previous appearance was just a projection. But now, thanks to Roy, she was a real little girl, a true devil. "Your turn, Gaia. You're not going to refuse, are you?" Roy asked, turning to Gaia with a confident smirk. Gaia looked at Alea, then at the evil piece in her hand. She decided to accept it. She had no other choice. And she also wanted to experience having a body. She began the transformation. Roy smiled. Now, both Gaia and Alea were his servants. Did this mean he was the ruler of this world now? But that wasn't very useful. It just meant he could freely travel between parallel worlds. He wasn't interested in the 5 magics of the Fate universe. Perhaps he could visit the world of Fate/Kaliad Liner Prisma sometime, he mused. But for now, he had to help Artoria. After Gaia's transformation was complete, Roy patted the 2 little girls' heads and said, "You two wait here, okay?" "Yes, Master," Alea replied. "Oh? Master? I like that title," Roy chuckled. He then returned to the mansion. "Master, did you succeed?" Artoria asked anxiously as he appeared in the living room. "Of course I did." "I never fail," Roy replied with a smile, patting her head. Artoria normally wouldn't allow anyone to touch her head, as it was a matter of royal dignity. But after giving herself to him, she had grown fond of this gesture. Sometimes, she even asked for head pats. "Are we really going to travel to a parallel world?" "That's amazing," Sakura said with a smile, holding onto Roy's arm. Yes we are." "And there are many more amazing things to come," Roy replied. He then summoned Gaia and Alea. "Take us to Artoria's time," he commanded. "Yes, Master," Alea replied. The girls looked at Gaia and Alea curiously. "Is this the consciousness of the world? How fascinating." "They're just little girls," Rin commented. "They're so cute." "Royoni-chan, will our children be this cute?" Irisfeel asked innocently. "Mama, you already have me," Ilya protested. Roy chuckled. Irisfeel always said whatever was on her mind. Alea finished her preparations, and they vanished from the mansion. They reappeared on a battlefield filled with smoke and carnage. Corpses littered the ground, and the air was thick with the stench of blood. Sakura, Rin, and the others couldn't help but cover their noses. The scene was gruesome. This was the site of the final battle between Artoria and Mordred. It was here that Mordred had been killed by Artoria, who was also fatally wounded. And it was here that Artoria had made the contract with Alea to become a heroic spirit, hoping to use the Holy Grail to save her country. Artoria and Mordred stared at the battlefield in silence. After spending time with Roy and the others, and with Roy's guidance, Mordred finally understood that everything she had done was orchestrated by Morgan, Artoria's sister. She hadn't wanted to betray Artoria. When she first learned that Artoria was her father, she had admired her greatly. But fearing that her true origins would be discovered and rejected, she had been manipulated by Morgan, step by step, until the kingdom was on the verge of collapse. Chapter 213, The Way to Save Britain, Reverse Time, Morgan Le Fay. Mordred had always craved Artoria's acknowledgement but feared being rejected for her true origins. That's why she had been susceptible to Morgan's manipulations. But now, looking at the carnage around them, she was filled with guilt. If she hadn't rebelled, perhaps Britain wouldn't be in this state. Roy understood their feelings. Although they had reconciled, the consequences of their actions weighed heavily on their hearts. He gently patted their heads and said, "Don't blame yourselves anymore. What's done is done. And besides, it's not like we can't change the past." "What? Roy, do you have a way?" Artoria asked, her eyes widening with hope. "Roy, what can we do?" Mordred also chimed in. "Of course I do. But I'll need a little reward first," Roy said with a playful grin, pointing at his cheeks. Artoria and Mordred understood. They blushed and kissed him on the cheeks. Roy beamed. He then looked towards the void and called out, "Alea." "Master, what is it?" Alea appeared before him in a flash of light. "Can you turn back time in this world?" Roy asked. His plan was to reverse time, preventing the battle between Artoria and Mordred and saving countless lives. That Is it difficult? Roy was surprised. As the consciousness of humanity, Alea should be able to do that easily. It's possible, but I need Gaia's help, Alea explained. She was only the will of humanity. To reverse time, she needed the cooperation of Gaia, the will of the planet. That's easy. Gaia, come out here. Roy snapped his fingers, and Gaia appeared beside Alea. You heard what I said, right? Yes, Master, Gaia replied. Then work with Alea and turn back time. Yes, Master. How far back can you turn back time? Roy asked. Alea and Gaia exchanged glances. About a month, Alea replied. A month. That's enough. Go ahead, Roy said with a wave of his hand. Roy, are you sure about this? Artoria asked worriedly. Don't worry. If we go back a month, your battle with Mordred shouldn't have started yet, Roy reassured her. I hope so, Artoria said with a nod. To reverse the flow of time for an entire world, it's incredible, Rin commented in awe. She had never imagined such a thing was possible. One-chan, this is just the beginning. There are many more incredible things to come, Sakura said with a giggle. She was used to Roy's extraordinary abilities. Alea and Gaia began the ritual. A transparent white barrier enveloped them, and the world around them started to rewind. Plants, trees, even the fallen soldiers were revived. The battlefield they were on gradually reverted to its original state, as if the war had never reached this place. The sun and moon also reversed their course, day and night alternating rapidly. It was a mesmerizing sight. Only those within the white barrier remained unaffected. After a while, the world finally stopped changing. Master, it's done, Alea reported, looking slightly exhausted. Good work. You two go and rest now, Roy said with a smile, patting their heads. Yes, Master, they replied and disappeared. Artoria and Mordred were both excited and apprehensive. Did we really go back in time? Artoria asked. Let's go to the city and see for ourselves, Roy suggested with a grin. He opened a portal, and they vanished. They reappeared in the capital city of Britain. Artoria, still wearing her blue battle dress, was immediately recognized by the citizens. They knelt before her, their eyes filled with admiration and respect. King Arthur was a beloved ruler in the eyes of her people. People often said that Artoria didn't understand the human heart, but they didn't realize how many people she had won over with her charisma and leadership. Artoria, seeing the citizens bowing before her, felt a surge of pride. She had witnessed this many times before, so she simply waved to them with a smile. This confirmed that they had indeed traveled back in time. Otherwise, the capital wouldn't be so peaceful. Let's go to the castle, Roy said, noticing Artoria's excitement. Artoria, seeing the peaceful capital, was eager to see the situation in the castle. But hearing Roy's words, she took a deep breath and calmed herself down. Let's go. She led the way, and they headed towards the castle. Your Majesty, you've returned, a knight with golden hair exclaimed, kneeling before Artoria. Gawain, rise, Artoria said, pleased to see him. Gawain was one of her nephews and one of the wisest knights of the Round Table. Your Majesty, who are these people? Gawain asked, looking at Roy and the others curiously. They are my friends, Artoria explained briefly, then continued towards the castle. Gawain, although still confused, didn't stop them. Inside the castle, Artoria learned about the current situation. Britain was still facing threats from external enemies, and Lancelot's betrayal had weakened the kingdom significantly. Britain was on the verge of collapse. It was no wonder Mordred's rebellion had succeeded so easily. Artoria, understanding the gravity of the situation, fell into deep thought. But she couldn't come up with a solution. Mordred's true reason for rebelling was Morgan's manipulation. Even without Mordred, Morgan would still instigate a civil war. And defeating Morgan without bloodshed would be difficult. Morgan was Artoria's sister and a powerful mage in her own right. She had also desired to be king. But Artoria was destined to be king from birth. Morgan couldn't compete with that. That's why she resented Artoria and plotted against her. Seeing Artoria's troubled expression, Roy gently patted her head. Artoria blinked, then leaned into his touch. "Don't worry about it, Artoria. You have me now." "Leave everything to me," Roy reassured her. "Okay," Artoria replied with a smile and a nod. To bring peace to Britain and resolve all internal and external conflicts seemed like a daunting task. But for Roy, it was simple. First, he had to solve the internal problem, Morgan. Once she was dealt with, Britain could unite against external threats. Roy shared his plan, and the girls agreed. But Artoria hesitated. Morgan was powerful and had many followers. It wouldn't be easy to defeat her. "Don't worry. Leave it to me," Roy said confidently. "Okay." Artoria nodded, reassured. With the plan set, Roy didn't waste any time. He took Scathack and the others to Morgan's castle. "Has King Arthur returned?" a mature woman asked coldly, sitting on a throne in a grand hall within the castle. A knight knelt before her. "Yes, Morgan-sama," the knight replied. "Leave," Morgan dismissed him with a wave of her hand. The hall fell silent. Morgan closed her eyes, lost in thought. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared in the hall, startling her. She narrowed her eyes, surprised but calm. She simply waited. The magic circle glowed brightly. Several figures materialized within the hall. It was Roy and the others. "You must be Morgan," Roy said, observing her with interest. Morgan looked strikingly similar to Artoria, almost like they were carved from the same mold. But Morgan was more mature, with a tall, voluptuous figure that exuded an alluring charm. Compared to her, Artoria was like a child. Roy hadn't expected Morgan to be so attractive. He was intrigued. Chapter 214, The Mature and Alluring Morgan. Peace at last. "Who are you?" Morgan asked, her brow furrowed as she examined Roy and the others. She didn't recognize them. In Britain, she should know every person who has such power. "Morgan Le Fay, your schemes have been exposed." "Surrender," Roy declared, his eyes gleaming with amusement as he looked at the alluring woman. He suddenly remembered. Wasn't Gawain, the knight they had met at the castle gate, Morgan's son? Gawain was almost as old as him. Yet, Morgan, a mother of several children, still looked so young and beautiful. Roy was quite interested in this MILF. "You were sent by King Arthur?" Morgan asked, having already guessed their identity. Arthur had just returned, and now these people showed up. It couldn't be a coincidence. It seemed her sister had discovered her treachery. "You could say that." "Now, come with us," Roy said with a nod, then snapped his fingers. Morgan stood up and walked towards him involuntarily. "What did you do?" she asked, surprised. As a sorceress, she was quite skilled in magic. But she hadn't even noticed how he had taken control of her. "You don't need to know. Just come with us to see Artoria," Roy replied with a smirk, gently lifting her chin with his finger. He then opened a portal, and they vanished. In Artoria's throne room. "Artoria, I brought your sister," Roy announced, taking a seat on Artoria's throne and looking at the two sisters with amusement. "Sister, why did you do this?" Artoria asked, her expression filled with sadness and confusion. She had always respected Morgan, but she couldn't believe her sister would betray her like this. Morgan's actions had indirectly led to the destruction of Britain. Morgan remained silent. No one knew whether she truly hated Artoria or loved her in a twisted way. "It's simple. Your sister also wanted to be king, but you took the throne from her. So, she wanted revenge," Roy explained. The girls finally understood. Struggles for the throne were common throughout history. They sympathized with Artoria for being betrayed by her own sister. Exposed, Morgan had nothing to say. Artoria, heartbroken by the truth, turned to Roy. "Roy, what should we do now?" she asked, having decided to leave the decision to him. It's simple. Your sister, Morgan, wants to be king, right? Then let her have the throne, Roy replied casually. But Artoria hesitated. What? Are you reluctant to give up the throne? You said you weren't suited to be king. And besides, aren't you coming with me? Roy asked, his words hitting Artoria's insecurities. Indeed, what was she still clinging to? She had already achieved her goal of saving Britain. Perhaps her sister would be a better ruler. And she had already promised Roy that she would become his queen. Artoria nodded. I agree. She turned to Morgan. Perhaps I'm really not fit to be king. Sister, I hope you can lead Britain to prosperity. Morgan, finally getting the throne she had always desired, wasn't as excited as she thought she would be. Instead, she felt a pang of sadness. Are you leaving? She asked after a long silence. Yes, because I'm Roy's queen now, Artoria replied with a smile, glancing at Roy. She felt relieved after giving up the throne. Morgan had never seen Artoria with such an expression before. All right, since you've made up your mind, Artoria, let's prepare for the coronation ceremony, Roy declared. Okay. Artoria summoned Gawain and instructed him to gather the Knights of the Round Table and the ministers. Meanwhile, Roy was working on his part of the plan. Now that the internal conflict was resolved, it was time to deal with the external threats. Britain was an island nation located outside the Roman Empire, separated by the sea. It had been under Rome's protection. But the Roman Empire was crumbling under the invasion of barbarians. To fight the barbarians, Rome had withdrawn its forces from Britain. Without Rome's protection, Britain quickly fragmented into smaller kingdoms. Artoria's kingdom was one of them, but through her efforts, she had managed to reunite most of Britain. However, there were still some rebellious factions outside her control. It's just a small island nation. Why fight over such a tiny piece of land? Roy wondered, feeling a bit bored. Are you really going to give me the throne? Morgan suddenly asked. Of course. Why? Don't you want it? Roy replied casually, sitting on the throne and looking at her with amusement. Where are you taking Artoria? To my world, of course. Morgan could sense that Roy's world was extraordinary, but it didn't concern her. Soon, Artoria had gathered the Knights of the Round Table. When she announced that she was abdicating the throne in favor of Morgan, the knights were stunned. I object. Gawain was the first to speak up. Morgan scowled. Gawain was her son, planted among the Knights of the Round Table as a spy. But he had been completely won over by Artoria's charisma and had failed to follow her orders. And now, he was the first to oppose her ascension to the throne. Morgan was furious. She still desired to be queen. Silence. My decision is final, Artoria declared, her voice filled with authority. The knights were helpless. The coronation ceremony would take several days to prepare. And Roy was also preparing his magic. He was going to create a massive magic circle that would envelop the entire island of Britain. The effect of the magic circle was to prevent anyone within its boundaries from harboring any thoughts of rebellion or war. In other words, all the citizens of Britain would be united and peaceful. Of course, if the ruler was a tyrant, the citizens would suffer. Because the king would have absolute power, and no one could resist. Under this magic circle, Britain would experience unprecedented peace. But it might also lead to some unhealthy societal developments. However, that wasn't Roy's concern. With his magic authority, he quickly set up the magic circle. The remaining rebel factions in Britain surrendered without a fight. Within a few days, peace and tranquility returned to Britain. Even those from outside Britain, upon entering the island, would lose any desire for conflict. This completely eliminated any threat of invasion. Artoria, seeing that Britain was finally at peace, abdicated the throne to Morgan. But Morgan, having witnessed Roy's godlike powers, had lost interest in the throne. As the new queen, she held absolute power over Britain. But she felt empty, especially knowing that Artoria and Roy would soon leave. In Morgan's chambers. Roy had been invited by Morgan. They were about to return to the world of Highschool DxD. What did Morgan want from him? He entered the room and saw Morgan sitting on her throne, looking regal and elegant in a beautiful gown. But upon seeing Roy, she abandoned her queenly demeanor and rushed towards him. "Roy-sama, I've been waiting for you," she said with a smile, taking his hand. Roy was surprised. What was she doing? "Please follow me." Morgan led him to the throne and had him sit on it. Roy didn't care about the throne. He sat down casually. "You went through all this trouble to invite me here just to have me sit on your throne?" he asked, leaning back with his legs crossed. Morgan stood before him respectfully. "No, Roy-sama. I know you don't care about the things of mortals." "I invited you here because I want to follow you," Morgan declared, kneeling before him and performing a knightly salute. Rather than being a useless king of Britain, it would be better to follow Roy and perhaps achieve something greater. "Oh?" Roy was surprised by Morgan's choice. "Didn't you always want to be the ruler of Britain? Why would you want to follow me after just becoming the king? How can the throne of Britain compare to following you?" "I believe even being your follower would be more rewarding than being a king," Morgan replied with a confident smile. She was certain she had made the right decision. Roy smiled. He hadn't expected Morgan to be so decisive and pragmatic. Morgan, seeing his smile, felt relieved. But it wasn't enough. She needed to offer more. She slowly unbuttoned her dress. She had noticed Roy's interest in her when they first met. This was her final gambit. Roy smirked. This woman was full of surprises. He pulled her close and, right there on the throne, embraced her passionately. Chapter 215, Return to the Underworld. Reward from Graphia Ophis Obsession. With Morgan no longer interested in the throne and wanting to follow Roy, they had to choose a new ruler for Britain. Morgan decided to pass the throne to her son, Gawain. Although Gawain had disobeyed her several times, he was still her son. Roy didn't care who became the king. The coronation ceremony was held, and Gawain became the new ruler of Britain. Having settled everything, Roy prepared to return to the world of Highschool DxD with everyone. But first, he had to pay a visit to the Throne of Heroes. Or rather, since Gaia and Alea were now his servants, the Throne of Heroes was his property. He was going there to recruit some new members for his peerage. No one knew how many heroic spirits resided in the Throne of Heroes. But Roy had made a promise to Mash, and he intended to keep it. After all, she had given herself to him. He couldn't let her down. So, he went to the Throne of Heroes and dealt with Solomon and the 72 demon gods. Then, he took all the female heroic spirits he found interesting. Roy and his ever-growing entourage returned to the DxD world. The sudden appearance of so many people in the room made it quite crowded. And the unfamiliar auras in the castle quickly caught the attention of Rias and Sona. They exchanged exasperated glances. Era, it seems Roy has brought back even more girls," Aquino commented with a chuckle. "I'm used to it by now," Rias sighed. She had grown accustomed to Roy's habit of bringing home new girls. "Rias, are you worried about your position in Roy's heart?" Sona asked, her expression unreadable. "Oh, of course not." Rias denied, a bit too quickly. But she was indeed worried. There were so many girls in the house now, and they were all so exceptional. "There's no need to worry, Rias. You should have more confidence in your charm," Sona said with a reassuring smile. Rias paused, then smiled confidently. "You're right." Her renewed confidence was captivating. Even Sona couldn't help but admire her. Just then, Roy emerged from his room with Sakura and the others. He entered the living room and met Rias and Sona's gazes, blushing slightly. He then introduced everyone. He had brought back so many girls that the castle was getting a bit crowded. So, he decided to take some of the heroic spirits to the Lucifuge territory in the underworld. The family needed talented individuals to help manage their affairs, and these heroic spirits were all experts in their respective fields. They could become pillars of the Lucifuge family. After settling everyone in, Roy was summoned by Graphia. "Come with me, Roy," she said. In a private room, Graphia patted her lap, inviting Roy to lie down. Roy was surprised. He hadn't expected Graphia to offer him a lap pillow. He happily accepted the offer. "Roy, this trip must have been tiring for you," Graphia said sympathetically. She was referring to the fact that he had brought back so many powerful girls. "It must have taken a lot of effort." Roy thought about it. It hadn't been that tiring. His trip to the world of fate had been more like a vacation. He had simply picked up a few servants along the way. But it was true that it had been somewhat challenging. After all, there were so many servants with different personalities. It was difficult to convince them all to become his servants. In the end, he had resorted to forceful persuasion. "It wasn't too bad," Roy replied vaguely. He couldn't exactly say it was a piece of cake. "With these girls helping out, my workload has decreased significantly. This is all thanks to you, Roy. So, tell me, what kind of reward do you want?" Graphia asked, leaning closer to him. This was a dangerous move. "Reward, huh?" Roy pondered, his gaze drifting downwards. Graphia, noticing his gaze, gently pulled his head towards her chest. Roy felt a surge of happiness. But that wasn't the end of his reward. After releasing his head, Graphia continued with her reward. After leaving the underworld, Roy returned to his castle. "Roy, you're back!" Rias exclaimed, pulling him towards the door. "Let's go shopping." Although she was confident in her charm, she still wanted to spend more time with Roy. Roy wouldn't refuse, of course. They strolled down the street, Rias clinging to his arm, her head resting on his shoulder, a blissful smile on her face. Roy enjoyed her affection. Although only a few seconds had passed in the DxD world, he had spent over a month in the world of fate. He had missed Rias. They reached a clothing store. "Rias, want to go in?" Roy asked with a smile. "No, I'm fine like this," Rias replied, shaking her head and snuggling closer to him. "All right." Roy chuckled. He realized that Rias simply wanted to be with him, not necessarily go shopping. He was happy to spend this relaxing time with her. Of course, it would be even better if they were alone. Aquino, Kaneko, Toru, and the others were following them at a distance. Era, I'm so jealous. I also want to go on a date with Roy alone," Aquino sighed wistfully. "Roy is so mean. He brought back so many girls again." "But I'll forgive him if he takes me on a date alone," Toru declared, puffing out her cheeks. Roy, hearing their conversation, smiled to himself. Their request was so simple. It seemed he needed to spend some quality time with each of them. And so, he spent the next 2 months doting on Rias, Sona, and the others. The underworld, after the recent purge, was much more peaceful. And thanks to Roy and the girls' efforts in suppressing the rebellion, many factions now considered them untouchable. Koho Town was also peaceful, with few stray devils appearing. But the threat of Eviatold, EXE, from another dimension still loomed. Roy decided to go to the dimensional gap and find Great Red. "Ophis, come here," Roy called out to Ophis, who was sitting on the sofa. He needed to talk to Ophis before going to the dimensional gap. She kept talking about taking Great Red's head, and it was becoming a bit of a problem. If he went to the dimensional gap without telling her, she would definitely throw a tantrum. Ophis jumped off the sofa and approached him. "Roy, what is it?" "Ophis, do you like living here?" Roy asked instead of directly mentioning Great Red. Ophis thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, life here is much more interesting than before. With Toru, Kana, Kaneko, Irisville, Lukoa, and the others to play with, and an endless supply of delicious food, life was definitely more enjoyable than before." "Is that so?" Roy smiled. "Then you don't need to return to the dimensional gap, right?" And you don't need to take Great Red's head anymore, right? No. I have to take Great Red's head. You promised me, Ophis insisted, shaking her head. Taking Great Red's head had become an obsession for her. She wouldn't give up. This was troublesome. Roy sat up and pulled Ophis into his arms. Ophis stared at him with her crimson eyes. The other girls in the room also watched them curiously. Roy thought for a moment, then finally came up with a plan. Ophis, Great Red actually sent you away to protect you, he said in a serious tone. Protect me? Ophis tilted her head in confusion. Yes, because this world is about to be invaded by powerful beings from another dimension. Great Red sent you away to keep you safe. Is that true, Roy? You're not lying to Ophis, are you? Toru asked suspiciously. Ophis also looked doubtful. Chapter 216, Ophis' goal is to have children, finding the Great Red, the threat of EXE world. Don't forget, I have the prophecy authority. I can see some things that will happen in the future. Great Red was killed by a powerful being from another dimension while trying to protect you, Ophis, Roy explained. Really? Ophis looked at him with wide eyes. Of course it's true, Roy assured her with a nod. But Ophis and Toru still seemed skeptical. Roy sighed and waved his hand, creating a projection. Using his memories, he recreated the scene of Great Red's battle against the extra-dimensional god, Regalziva, from the world of EXE. In the end, Regalziva beheaded Great Red. Ophis gasped, her eyes filled with disbelief as she witnessed Great Red's demise. She hadn't expected Great Red to be killed so easily. Is this real? Toru also expressed her surprise. But seeing Roy's expression, she believed him. Ophis could also tell that Roy wasn't lying, but she was still in shock. It's true, Roy confirmed. This wasn't something he had made up. It was a real event that would happen in the future. Toru, you doubt me? I'll punish you tonight, Roy said playfully, turning to Toru, who had questioned him earlier. Ehe. Toru giggled nervously, trying to appease him with her cuteness. Roy rolled his eyes. Ophis, now do you understand why I haven't fulfilled my promise to help you defeat Great Red, even though I have the power to do so? I understand. I won't take Great Red's head, Ophis said with a nod. Ha! Roy was surprised by her sudden change of heart. Toru, Kanna, and the others were also surprised. Because I have a new goal now, Ophis explained. A new goal? Is it to defeat Regalziva from the world of EXE? But with your current strength, that would be difficult. So, let me do it. I promise I won't lie to you this time. I'll definitely bring back Regalziva's head, Roy declared. No, my new goal is to have a child with Roy, Ophis said with her usual blank expression. The girls were speechless. They hadn't expected Ophis to say such a thing. But Ophis-chan, you're still too young for that. Just like Kanna, Toru said with a chuckle, patting Ophis's head. It's fine. I can grow up, Ophis replied. Her body glowed, and she transformed from a little girl into a young woman with a youthful face and a voluptuous figure. She was also much taller now. Her figure was now comparable to Lukoa's. Is this better? Ophis asked with a rare smile, her eyes curving into crescent moons. Kanna puffed out her cheeks, jealous that she hadn't thought of this before. She had wanted to do comfortable things with Roy, but he had always refused, saying she was too young. But she was over 10,000 years old. Just a bit younger than Toru. Seeing Ophis's actions gave her an idea. She also started to grow, eventually reaching a size similar to Toru's. Roy's eyes widened. Although Kanna was adorable as a little girl, she was also quite attractive in her mature form. Is this okay now? Toru-sama won't stop me now, right? Kanna asked smugly. Toru pouted and thought for a moment. She couldn't find a reason to object. Roy, Kanna started to say. Roy was speechless. The next day, Roy decided to take Ophis to find Great Red. He didn't know when the evil gods from the world of EXE would arrive. Perhaps things wouldn't go as planned. And his power had plateaued. Even contracting the two world consciousnesses in the Fate universe hadn't allowed him to reach the stellar level. He was currently at the peak of the planetary level. But if he contracted Great Red in Ophis, he might be able to reach the stellar level. Well, one thing was different now. Ophis wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a young woman. He slipped away from Rias and the others with Ophis and used a spell to clean them both up. Then, while no one was paying attention, he took Ophis and entered the dimensional gap. So this is the dimensional gap. But how do we find Great Red? Roy wondered, looking at the chaotic space around them. The dimensional gap was filled with unstable spatial currents and dangerous storms. Without immense power or a spatial artifact, it was difficult to navigate. But this didn't pose much of a problem for Roy and Ophis. The only issue was that their senses were greatly diminished. Roy frowned in thought. I wonder if I can use prophecy to find Great Red, he mused. He activated the authority. A wave of energy washed over him. He saw a vision of a massive dragon soaring through the dimensional gap. Great Red seemed to have noticed something and stopped, waiting. In the next moment, Roy and Ophis appeared before her. Wow! Last time, I only saw a fleeting shadow, but seeing her in person is even more impressive. Roy exclaimed. Great Red true form was massive, perhaps even half the size of a planet. Even Lucoa wasn't this big. Of course, size wasn't everything. Ophis, why have you returned to the dimensional gap? Didn't I tell you not to come back? Great Red asked, her voice echoing through the void. I'm not here to take your head. I'm here to protect you, Ophis replied with a blank expression. After Roy's explanation, she no longer held any animosity towards Great Red. In fact, she felt a sense of kinship with her fellow dragon. After all, they were both born in the dimensional gap. They were practically sisters. Great Red was surprised, then said coldly, I don't need your protection. Leave the dimensional gap, or I'll force you out myself. Her harsh words angered Ophis, and she almost attacked. But Roy stopped her. Ophis, let me handle this, he said, patting her head, then turned to Great Red. Great Red, I've learned that powerful beings from another dimension are planning to invade. You won't be able to face them alone. Oh? How did you learn about this? Great Red asked, surprised. As the guardian of this world, she was aware of the impending invasion, but she hadn't expected a devil to know about it. I have the authority of prophecy. I saw a vision of you being killed by an extra-dimensional god, Roy explained. Is that so? Perhaps that's my fate, Great Red replied calmly. As the guardian, she wouldn't run away, even if she knew she would die. Are you really prepared to die just like that? Without you, this world will be destroyed, Roy said, his expression unreadable. He waited for her response. Devil, do you have a solution? She finally asked. Of course I do. What do you think of my power? Roy asked instead of answering directly. Great Red examined him, but she couldn't see through his strength. This surprised her. She was the strongest being in this world. How could there be a devil she couldn't comprehend? Ha! Roy chuckled and released a fraction of his power. Great Red felt his aura and was shocked. He was stronger than her. Someone more powerful than her had appeared in this world. It was unbelievable. Great Red, you might think I'm strong, but even with our combined strength, we're no match for the extra-dimensional gods, Roy explained. The strongest beings in the world of EXE were the three main gods, the malevolent god, the wicked god, and the fierce god. The malevolent god was the strongest of the three. And the one who would kill Great Red was Regalziva, the fierce god. Below the three main gods were beings like Great Red and Ophis. For example, Rizavim Levan Lucifer, the leader of the Cows Brigade, and Apophis, the Egyptian god of chaos. And the three main gods' subordinates were all as powerful as Great Red. This meant that the three main gods were likely stellar-level beings. The difference between the stellar and planetary levels was like the difference between the planetary level and ultimate class. There was a massive gap. It was no wonder Great Red had been instantly killed by Regalziva. Chapter 217. Officially a stellar-level being is subduing the Great Red Testament of Sister New Devil World? Even so, I won't back down, Great Red declared after a moment of silence. Protecting this world was her duty. Don't worry, Great Red. Since I'm here, I'll definitely find a way to stop the invasion, Roy assured her, then opened his palm, revealing an evil piece. If you accept this evil piece, your power will increase significantly. So you want to make me your servant? Great Red asked, understanding his intention. But she didn't believe that an evil piece could make her stronger. This isn't an ordinary evil piece. You can take a look, Roy said, knowing she was skeptical. Great Red's massive eyes focused on the evil piece in his hand, almost crossing. Roy couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. After examining it for a moment, Great Red realized that it was not a common evil piece. Even she couldn't see through it. But that wasn't enough to convince her that it could make her stronger. A devil servant was, in a sense, a family member. But it was also a subordinate. Even if it was to protect the world from invasion, becoming someone else's subordinate wasn't an easy decision for Great Red. Seeing her stubbornness, Roy wondered if he should resort to force. But a fight between them would be catastrophic. He had an idea. It seems you don't believe the evil piece can make you stronger. In that case, let's have Ophis try it, he said, then turned to Ophis. Ophis, would you accept the power of the evil piece? Yes, Ophis replied without hesitation. Although she was an emotionless little girl, she trusted Roy completely after becoming his woman. Roy smiled and handed her the evil piece. Ophis merged it with her body without a second thought. At their level, there was no need for a ritual. Ophis's aura surged as she absorbed the evil piece's power, growing stronger and stronger. She had been at the early stage of the planetary level, but now, she had reached to the mid-stage. Although it was just a small step, the difference was significant. Great Red was also at the peak of the early stage of the planetary level. Previously, she could easily defeat Ophis. But now, Ophis could easily overpower her. Great Red's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected the evil piece to be this effective. It had increased Ophis's power by a whole level. If Ophis had tried to achieve this through normal means, it would have taken her a lifetime. Although they were born with immense power, it was incredibly difficult for them to grow stronger through training. There was almost no hope for them to progress further. Ophis finally retracted her aura. Roy, I'm stronger now, she exclaimed, her usually expressionless face filled with surprise and joy. See? I didn't lie to you, Roy said with a chuckle, patting her head, then turned to Great Red. After contracting Ophis, he could feel his own power reaching a critical point. If he contracted Great Red, he would definitely progress to the stellar level. I believe you. To protect this world from the invasion, I'm prepared to become your servant, Great Red finally agreed after a moment of contemplation. Protecting this world was her mission. Even if it meant paying a price, she would do it. Then accept the power of the evil piece, Roy said, summoning another evil piece and sending it towards her. Great Red didn't resist this time. The evil piece merged with her. A powerful aura erupted, shaking the entire dimensional gap. Roy quickly transported them to the subspace. His own power surged uncontrollably, and an even more powerful aura exploded outwards. This aura transcended the subspace and enveloped the entire realm of DxD. The underworld, heaven, Asgard. Everyone felt the oppressive pressure. What's happening? Countless powerful beings wondered, confused and alarmed. This aura. Surzex, feeling the pressure, recognized it. It was his brother-in-law. Only Roy could have this unfathomable power. The oppressive aura soon subsided. Roy is officially a stellar-level being. P.S. A Tier 4 stellar level being is capable of destroying stars. P.S. Saitama, after his fight with Cosmic Garu, is at this level. And Great Red's power had also increased to the high stage of the planetary level. She had jumped 2 levels. Great Red, you should transform into your human form, Roy said, staring at her massive eye with a slight discomfort. Yes, Master, Great Red replied. A blinding light flashed, and she transformed into a beautiful young woman, similar in appearance to Ophis. Perhaps she had modeled her human form after Ophis. But why was she naked? Roy sighed. He snapped his fingers, and a dress materialized on her body. Roy nodded in satisfaction, looking at the now-clothed Great Red. Great Red. That's not a very personal name. How about I give you a new one, he said, stroking his chin thoughtfully. How about Akaheim? It was a combination of Great Red's name and the name of the Red Dragon Emperor. He was quite proud of his naming sense. Okay, Akaheim agreed. Now, come home with me. Roy took Ophis and Akaheim's hands, ready to teleport back home. But Akaheim shook her head. No, I have to stay here and guard this world. As the guardian, she couldn't leave her post. I see. Roy frowned. How about this, Akaheim? Come home with us and meet everyone, then you can return. You're my servant now, so you should at least visit your new home, Roy suggested. Akaheim considered it. Leaving for a short while shouldn't be a problem. She nodded in agreement. Let's go then. Roy smiled and snapped his fingers, and they vanished from the dimensional gap. They reappeared in the living room of Roy's mansion. You're finally back, a sulky voice said from behind him. Rias, what's wrong? Roy asked with an awkward chuckle. Humph. Going out early in the morning and bringing back another beautiful woman. You're quite something, aren't you? Rias pouted, glaring at Akaheim. Ahem. Rias, this is Great Red, the guardian of this world. You've met her before, haven't you? Roy explained, trying to appease her. Great Red? Rias's jealousy subsided as she recalled the massive dragon she had seen before. You mean she's the one we saw last time? That's right. Call everyone. Akaheim is part of our family now, Roy declared. Rias was no longer jealous. She was simply amazed by his accomplishment. He had even managed to make Great Red his servant. It was unbelievable. Roy gathered everyone in the living room and introduced Akaheim. Akaheim was surprised to see Toru, Elma, Ilialu, Kanna, and Lukoa. She hadn't expected there to be so many dragons in this world, and she hadn't even noticed their presence. But it was understandable. They had been discreet, not revealing their true power. Akaheim, after enjoying the hospitality and delicious food, returned to the dimensional gap. But she promised to visit often. Roy didn't stop her. He was no longer worried about her safety. With the devil contract, he could reach her instantly, no matter where she was. Just like with Yasaka in Kyoto, he would visit Akaheim from time to time. Having resolved the issue with Great Red, Roy decided to go on another adventure to further increase his power. The system had already refreshed several new worlds. He wasn't familiar with Undefeated Bahamut Chronicle, so he skipped it. The Testament of Sister New Devil. The protagonist, Mio Naruse, looked almost identical to Rias. But that was to be expected, as Shinmai Mao no Testament was inspired by Highschool DxD. But in some ways, it was even more extreme than Highschool DxD. Shinmai Mao no Testament only focused on fan service. The main characters did almost everything except the final act. It was practically a henta asterisk. And a very effective one at that. But despite being more explicit, it wasn't as popular as Highschool DxD. Highschool DxD had more than just fan service. It also had exciting battles. The battles in Shinmai Mao no Testament, on the other hand, were a bit underwhelming. But Roy, seeing that it was a Rias clone, decided to visit that world. He couldn't let anyone else have her. He also saw the world of Arcane, but he hadn't watched it before, so he ignored it. And so, he set off to rescue Ria's clone. Chapter 218, First Meeting with Mio Naruse and Maria Naruse, New Little Sisters? Having decided to rescue Mio Naruse, Roy immediately set his plan in motion. But first, he informed Rias and the others, even though he would be back in a flash. He didn't want them to worry. Rias and Sona readily agreed and didn't ask to come with him. They knew that if Roy wanted them to come, he would have said so. There was no need for them to accompany him to the world of Shinmai Mao no Testament. And so, Roy vanished from the room. Under the bright night sky, Roy appeared above a bustling city. So this is the world of Shinmai Mao no Testament. He mused, a smirk playing on his lips. He scanned the city with his senses, instantly pinpointing the current time and location. He found Mio Naruse and Maria Naruse fleeing through a dark alley. Mio was one of the main heroines of this world. And Maria was a succubus who had been threatened into serving as Mio's guardian. They were being chased by a group of stray demons. Mio had inherited immense power from her father, the previous demon lord, making her a target for both stray demons and demons from the demon realm. But she couldn't control her inherited power yet. Although she has great potential. Her own power was being suppressed by her father's conflicting energy. She couldn't even defeat a few stray demons. And Maria, tasked with watching over Mio, was essentially useless in battle. So, they had no choice but to run. Roy, observing the scene, stroked his chin thoughtfully. He teleported to a location ahead of Mio and Maria. There was an old, abandoned house. Roy waved his hand, and the dilapidated house instantly transformed into a beautiful two-story mansion with a small garden filled with flowers and trees. It wasn't a grand castle, but it was cozy and comfortable. Roy nodded in satisfaction. He entered the house. It was fully furnished, with everything they might need. He then cast a subtle suggestion spell on Mio and Maria. When they reached this place, they would enter the house and hide. And he had placed a barrier around the house, preventing the stray demons from entering. Having made all the necessary arrangements, Roy brewed a cup of tea, turned on the TV, and waited for the two girls to arrive. "Mio-sama, be careful!" Maria exclaimed. Mio and Maria were still running. These stray demons were different from the ones in the world of Highschool DxD. They were more like ghosts, appearing and disappearing without warning. A stray demon suddenly materialized behind Mio, and Maria cried out in alarm. Ha! Mio also noticed the attacker. She leaped forward, narrowly dodging the attack. Then, she spun around and faced the stray demon, summoning a magic circle that unleashed a torrent of crimson flames. Boom! The stray demon was instantly incinerated. Mio sighed in relief, exhausted from the constant running and fighting. She collapsed to the ground. "Mio-sama, we have to keep moving," Maria urged, helping her up. Mio knew they couldn't stay here, so she forced herself to stand. "Let's go." They continued running, supported by Maria. After a while, they realized that there were no more stray demons pursuing them. "It seems they've given up for now." "Let's rest for a bit," Mio said, her face grimy and exhausted. "Yes, Mio-sama. That house over there looks nice." "Let's go there," Maria suggested, pointing towards the beautiful mansion. "But, isn't that inappropriate? There might be someone living there," Mio hesitated. "Don't worry, Mio-sama. We'll just stay for one night and leave tomorrow." "The owner won't even know we were here," Maria reassured her. She had done this many times before. They would leave before the owner woke up, and she would cast a spell to erase their memories. "All right." Mio agreed. They entered the courtyard and admired the beautiful garden. Mio wondered what kind of person lived here. Ding dong! The doorbell rang. Roy, knowing they had arrived, opened the door. "May I help you?" he asked with a smile, looking at the two girls. On the left was Mio Naruse, who looked almost identical to Rias, especially with her long red hair. and on the right was Maria Neruz, a petite silver-haired succubus. Mio and Maria were stunned by Roy's appearance. They had seen many handsome men, and this wasn't a world where looks mattered. But they had never met anyone as naturally handsome and charming as Roy. Their first impression of him was excellent. Mio blushed and looked down, flustered. Maria, on the other hand, grinned mischievously. "From today onwards, we're your little sisters," she declared. She then cast a charm spell on Roy. An ordinary person would instantly accept them as his sisters under the influence of this spell. Of course, Roy wasn't affected by such a low-level spell, but he decided to play along. "Welcome home, my dear little sisters," he said with a warm smile, inviting them inside. "Maria, is this really okay?" "I don't want to lie to him anymore," Mio said, her conscience bothering her. She didn't want to manipulate this kind man. "Mio-sama, we can't be picky now. Besides, wouldn't it be nice to have this handsome man as our older brother?" Maria asked with a playful grin. Mio was conflicted. She couldn't deny that the idea was tempting. It would be wonderful to have a caring older brother. "My dear little sisters, you must be hungry. I'll prepare dinner for you," Roy said, leading them into the house. "Wow! It's so clean here," Maria exclaimed, impressed by the tidy living room. "It seems our new brother really cares about us," Mio commented with a smile. After running for so long, she was indeed quite hungry. "Yes, he's so kind," Maria agreed. Soon, a delicious aroma wafted from the kitchen. Mio and Maria couldn't help but salivate. They wondered what he was cooking. They tiptoed towards the kitchen and peeked inside. "Oni-chan, what are you making? It smells so good," Maria asked, sniffing the air. Roy turned around with a smile. "It's ramen. It'll be ready soon." "I can't wait," Mio exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. The ramen was soon ready. Roy brought the bowls to the dining table. Maria was about to dig in, but Roy stopped her. "You have to wash your hands before eating." "Ugh." Maria pouted, clearly unhappy. "Yes, Oni-chan," Mio said, taking Maria to the bathroom to wash their hands. "This is so troublesome," Maria grumbled in the bathroom. "Washing hands before meals is important." "You're just lazy," Mio scolded playfully. "Fine. But this brother is different from the other humans we've charmed before. He's actually taking care of us," Maria commented, recalling their past experiences with the charm spell. Those who were charmed usually became a bit dull and unresponsive, not this attentive. "Maybe he really does have a little sister," Mio suggested. She didn't find anything strange about Roy's behavior. She simply felt safe and comfortable around him. They finished washing their hands and returned to the dining table. "Here you go," Roy said, placing the bowls and utensils before them. They eagerly took a bite. This is delicious," Maria exclaimed, her eyes widening in surprise. This was the best ramen she had ever tasted. Mio also nodded in agreement. The flavor was incredible. "Eat as much as you want. There's plenty more," Roy said with a chuckle. He was amused by their reactions. His cooking skills were top-notch, of course. Another bowl. Maria finished her bowl in record time and held it out for more. Roy smiled and refilled her bowl. "Oni-chan, please." Mio also requested a refill, her face slightly red. Roy filled her bowl as well. Both of them had quite the appetite. They ate several bowls before finally feeling full. They leaned back in their chairs, satisfied. But when they saw Roy clearing the table, Mio immediately stood up. "Oni-chan, let us do that," she offered, taking the dishes from him. They felt bad for having eaten so much delicious food without doing anything in return. "All right, then I'll leave it to you," Roy said with a smile. The two girls started cleaning up. In the kitchen. "Mio-sama, why are we doing this? It's so boring, Maria complained as she washed the dishes. Oni-chan made such delicious food for us. It's the least we can do, Mio replied. But we're leaving tomorrow, aren't we? Maria asked, realizing that Mio wasn't planning on leaving. Mio fell silent. She had started to see Roy as her real brother. After their adoptive parents were killed by Zalgier, they had been on the run constantly. They had finally found a warm and welcoming home, and a kind older brother. She didn't want to leave. Maria, seeing her expression, understood her thoughts. If you don't want to leave, Mio-sama, then let's stay, she said. But Mio was tempted, but she was also hesitant. There were stray demons constantly trying to attack her. She didn't want to bring danger to her new brother. Don't worry, Mio-sama. There's no danger now. If there is, we can always leave, Maria reassured her. All right. Mio finally agreed. They decided to stay. Roy, in the living room, overheard their conversation and smirked. Everything was going according to plan. Here's your room, Mio, Roy said, showing her to a guest room. The room was fully furnished and decorated with feminine touches. Mio instantly fell in love with it. Thank you, Oni-chan. You're welcome. Get some rest, Roy said, patting her head gently. Mio blushed, enjoying his touch. Oni-chan, where's my room? Maria asked. It's next door. I'll show you. No need. I'll stay in Mio-sama's room, Maria decided. It was better to stay with Mio and protect her in case of a stray demon attack. Maria, you should go to your own room, Mio suggested. But Mio-sama. It's fine. I'll be okay. All right. Maria reluctantly agreed. Good night, Roy said with a smile, then left the room. Chapter 219, Mio Naru's First Kiss, the blue-haired girl, Yuki Nanaka. Oni-chan is so kind. Mio said, her face flushed as she watched Roy leave the room. Something feels off, Maria mused, stroking her chin thoughtfully. She felt that something was strange about Roy, but she could also sense that her charm spell was working on him. Maria, there's nothing wrong with Oni-chan. Now, go get some rest, Mio said, crossing her arms with a slight pout. All right, Mio-sama. Good night. Maria reluctantly left the room. But she wasn't going to sleep just yet. She had to protect Mio. Ever since she was assigned to watch over Mio, she had been working hard every night, eliminating the stray demons attracted to Mio's power. So, after leaving Mio's room, Maria went outside to patrol the area, as usual. However, hours passed, and she didn't encounter a single stray demon. She was starting to feel sleepy. That's strange. Why aren't there any stray demons tonight, she wondered. She carefully examined the surroundings but couldn't find anything unusual. Finally, she gave up and went back to sleep. The next morning, Roy was sleeping soundly when he heard the door open. He peeked through his eyelashes and saw Mio entering the room. What is she doing, he wondered. He decided to pretend to be asleep and observe her. Oni-chan looks cute when he's sleeping, Mio giggled, approaching the bed and looking at Roy with amusement. According to the knowledge Maria gave me, this is how you wake someone up, she muttered to herself, then climbed onto the bed and sat on Roy's lap. Dressed only in shorts and a tank top, she seemed oblivious to how suggestive her actions were. Oni-chan, wake up. She whispered, leaning down and resting her head on his chest. Roy decided to play along and opened his eyes. Ugh. Mio, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes and forcing a sleepy smile. Yes, I'm here to wake you up, Oni-chan, Mio replied with a bright smile. Okay. Roy nodded and wrapped his arms around her waist. Mio froze, her body stiffening. Oni-chan. She stammered, her voice trembling with embarrassment. Mio, aren't you forgetting something? The good morning kiss? Roy asked, feigning confusion. Gee, good morning kiss? Mio's face flushed crimson. Yes, we always do that, don't we? Mio, seeing his confused expression, instantly understood. She assumed that Roy's memories were influenced by the charm spell. That's why he remembered their past together. And in those memories, he always received a good morning kiss from his little sister when she woke him up. Mio's face turned even redder. But she realized that if she didn't play along, the charm spell might wear off. So, she did it. She gave him her first kiss. After a while, they finally left the room. "Oniai-chan, breakfast is almost ready," Maria called out from the kitchen. "Good work, Maria," Roy said, entering the kitchen after washing up. "Heh, it's nothing. But my cooking isn't as good as yours, Oniai-chan," Maria replied, a bit embarrassed. Her cooking was nowhere near as good as Roy's. "Don't worry, let me see." Roy examined the dishes Maria had prepared, then added some seasonings. "Wow, it smells so good now. How did you do that?" Maria asked in surprise. "It's all about the seasoning. I can teach you if you want," Roy offered with a smile. "Really? That would be great," Maria exclaimed, thrilled. They soon enjoyed a delicious breakfast. Mio and Maria ate with gusto, not caring about their table manners. After breakfast, "Mio, Maria, it's time for school," Roy announced. "School?" Mio and Maria exchanged hesitant glances. They hadn't been to school in days due to the constant attacks from stray demons. And they didn't want to bring those demons to school. "Yes, of course, you have to go to school. It's Monday, remember?" Roy insisted. Mio and Maria reluctantly agreed and got ready. "Oniai-chan, what class are you in?" Mio asked as they walked to school. They were surprised to find that Roy attended the same school as them. "I'm in the same class as you, Mio. Don't you remember?" Roy replied casually. Really?" Mio was confused. She didn't remember having a classmate named Roy. Perhaps he had transferred during her absence? She couldn't think of any other explanation. Roy had just arrived in this world. Of course, he wasn't in the same class as Mio. He had simply made it up. But with a simple spell to alter perceptions, he could make everyone in the school believe he was a student. Even the powerful beings in the school wouldn't notice anything amiss. At school, several girls greeted Roy enthusiastically. "Ha! When did Oniai-chan become so popular at school?" Mio wondered, feeling a bit annoyed by the attention he was receiving. "Oniai-chan is handsome. It's normal for him to attract girls," Maria replied matter-of-factly. "I guess so." Mio agreed. Roy simply smiled without saying anything. Maria wasn't attending this school, as she was only here to protect Mio. So, only Roy and Mio entered the school. The classroom fell silent as they entered. Then, it erupted in whispers. Mio-san and Roy-san came to school together. Mio-san was on leave, wasn't she? I wonder what their relationship is. Damn it! Is Mio-san going to steal Roy-san away from us? I'm not giving up. This new guy is infuriating. He's already close to two of the school's most beautiful girls. Mio blushed, hearing their comments. The desks were separate, so Roy and Mio weren't sitting together. Instead, Roy was sitting next to a blue-haired girl. Roy recognized her as Yuki Nanaka, a member of the hero clan and one of the main heroines. The power structure in this world was similar to that of Highschool DxD. There were demons, gods, as well as heroes. The three factions maintained a delicate balance of power. Yuki was here to monitor Mio, the heir to the demon lord. And since the hero clan was monitoring Mio, the demon and gods factions must have sent their own representatives as well. There was also Chisato Hasegawa, a mature woman with long black hair and glasses. Her true identity was a Furia, former high-ranking god amongst the 10 gods of the divine realm. However, most of her powers were sealed, leaving her with only defensive and support abilities. Her true strength was probably comparable to a Mao class. Roy was interested in her, but she wouldn't be easy to win over. Chisato Hasegawa was a close friend of Jin Toju and a former goddess, while also being the cousin of Basara Toju's mother. That's why she had readily given herself to Basara in the anime. But Roy didn't have such a connection with her. However, that wouldn't stop him. Roy found the class boring and decided to take a nap. The teacher didn't seem to mind. Thanks to his altered perception spell, which was based on Kuo Academy, he had top grades, so the teachers didn't bother him. Roy-san! Roy-san, wake up! Roy was suddenly nudged awake. He blinked and saw Yuki Nanaka looking at him. What is it, Nanaka-san? He asked. I need to talk to you. Come with me, Yuki said, taking his hand and pulling him out of the classroom. The other students were shocked. Yuki Nanaka was holding a boy's hand in public. This was big news. Mio, seeing her brother being dragged away, was furious and chased after them. They reached the staircase leading to the rooftop. Roy was pulled along by Yuki, with Mio following close behind. Yuki Nanaka, where are you taking my brother? Mio demanded, blocking their path. Your brother? Yuki's eyes narrowed. She didn't remember Mio having a brother. She realized that Roy must be under the influence of a charm spell. That's why he came to school with Mio today. He's not your brother, is he? Step aside, or else. Yuki threatened. Mio flinched, afraid that Yuki would tell Roy the truth and break the spell. She didn't want to lose her brother. Chapter 220, Rooftop Rivalry between Yuki Nanaka and Mio Naru's Yahiro Takegawa's probe. Yuki had brought Roy to the rooftop to get him away from Mio and the conflict between the various factions. Now that she knew he was under a charm spell, she would naturally try to break it. Under the influence of Roy's perception-altering magic, he was the Prince Charming of all the girls in school, and Yuki was no exception. Although she still cherished the memories of her childhood sweetheart, those feelings had faded over the years. Mio reluctantly stepped aside but followed them to the rooftop. So, Nanaka-san, what did you want to talk to me about? Roy asked, breaking the tense silence. Roy-san, I want you to leave Mio-san, Yuki said with a serious expression. Mio glared at her, feeling both angry and worried. Nanaka-san, don't joke around. Mio is my little sister. I would never leave her, Roy replied with a smile. As I suspected, Yuki thought. Roy was definitely under a spell. She was about to dispel the magic when Mio suddenly stepped in front of Roy, facing Yuki. I won't let you touch my brother, Mio declared, her eyes filled with determination. You're the one who's hurting Roy-san by using magic, Yuki retorted calmly. Mio froze. Yuki was right. They were the ones who had wronged Roy by intruding into his home and using charm magic on him. Nanaka-san, I don't know what you're talking about, but Mio didn't hurt me, Roy said, stepping forward to defend Mio. Mio's eyes welled up with tears, touched by his words. Just then, a figure appeared on the rooftop, overlooking them. Ha ha ha, this is interesting. Mio Naru's has involved a human, are you trying to get him killed? The newcomer taunted. He was dressed in a tuxedo and wore a mask, concealing his identity. Who are you? Yuki and Mio asked warily. They hadn't noticed his presence at all. Roy, however, instantly recognized him as Yahiro Takegawa, their classmate and the demon sent by the new Demon Lord faction to monitor Mio. Ha! Yahiro didn't answer. He suddenly attacked, firing a beam of light towards Roy. Look out! Mio cried, instinctively trying to shield Roy, but she was too slow. She could only watch helplessly as the black beam struck Roy. Yuki, however, remained calm. Did you do something? Roy asked, playing the role of an oblivious student. Oni-chan, are you alright? Mio asked, relieved that Roy wasn't hurt. She realized that the stranger hadn't attacked him but had tried to dispel the charm spell. Mio, what are you talking about? I'm fine, Roy replied with a confused expression. Mio sighed in relief, seeing that he hadn't lost his memories. Yahiro, however, was confused. He should have dispelled the charm spell, but Roy seemed unaffected. He examined Roy closely and realized that the spell was still in place. He was puzzled. He knew it was Maria's charm magic, and with his power, he should have been able to dispel it easily. Yuki was also confused. Roy, seeing their confusion, smirked inwardly. The charm spell on him was just a facade. It would be strange if they could dispel it. Interesting. Yahiro muttered, sensing that there was more to Roy than met the eye. He decided not to probe further and left the rooftop. Ding dong ding. The bell rang, signaling the start of the next class. Nanaka-san, please stop bothering my brother. Oniai-chan, let's go, Mio said, taking Roy's hand and leading him away. Yuki watched them leave with a frown, still puzzled by the charm spell that wouldn't break. Roy, being pulled along by Mio, asked, Mio, what was that all about? They mentioned magic? And why did that guy suddenly disappear? He played the role of a confused and curious student. Mio didn't know how to explain. Oniai-chan, we'll talk about it later. Class is starting, Mio said, flustered, and dragged Roy back to the classroom. Yuki was already seated at her desk. When Roy and Mio entered, they were met with hostile glares from the boys in the class. After all, Roy had held hands with two of the school's beauties today. The class was boring, and soon, it was time to go home. Roy and Mio left the school, where Maria was waiting for them. Mio-sama, Oniai-chan, you're finally back, she greeted them with a smile. Yes, Maria, let's go home, Roy replied with a nod, taking their hands. It was evening, and the sun was setting. As they walked home, Maria noticed something strange. This street was usually quiet, but today it was eerily silent. She scanned the surroundings, then her expression changed. She tugged on Mio's sleeve, gesturing behind Roy. Mio looked at her questioningly. There's a stray demon, Maria mouthed. Mio's eyes widened in alarm. They couldn't fight here with Roy Oniai-chan present. Oniai-chan, I just remembered something. Can you go ahead? I'll be right back, Mio said to Roy. She turned and ran back towards the school, with Maria following close behind. Don't worry, Oniai-chan. We'll be back soon. Maria called out. Roy shrugged and chuckled, seeing their hurried retreat. They clearly didn't want him to get involved. The stray demons were after Mio. If she left, they would naturally follow her. But was it really that simple? Mio and Maria reached a deserted alley. A stray demon suddenly attacked. Mio-sama, be careful. Maria shouted, then started fighting the stray demons that were appearing around them. They battled in the alley. There were over 10 stray demons. Although they weren't very strong individually, their numbers made them a formidable opponent. After a fierce struggle, Mio and Maria finally managed to defeat all the stray demons. Maria, let's go back, Mio said, panting heavily. She was eager to return to Roy. Yes, Mio-sama. Let's go. Those stray demons shouldn't reappear for a while, Maria agreed with a sigh of relief. They headed back, exhausted. But to their surprise, Roy was still waiting for them. Oniai-chan, why didn't you go back? Mio exclaimed, throwing her arms around him in a hug. Maria also hugged him. How could I leave my little sisters behind? Roy chuckled, embracing them both. Wah! Mio was touched. Suddenly, Roy's eyes narrowed. He saw a figure standing on a nearby rooftop, watching them with a smirk. It was Yahiro Takegawa, their classmate. Heh, let's see what you're made of, Yahiro muttered. Just then, a stray demon materialized behind Roy. Mio and Maria gasped in horror. The stray demon's claws slashed towards Roy's head. No! Mio cried out, trying to push Roy out of the way, but she was too exhausted to react in time. The claws struck Roy's head. Mio's eyes widened in shock and despair, and a surge of crimson energy erupted from her, threatening to go berserk. But then, both Mio and Maria froze. The stray demon's claws had passed harmlessly through Roy's head. and the demon itself suddenly vanished into thin air. Neo and Maria were speechless. Roy was unharmed, and the stray demon was dead. What had just happened? Even Yahiro, watching from afar, was stunned. He had been controlling that stray demon. This wasn't the outcome he had expected. "Who are you?" he muttered, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. To survive a stray demon's attack unscathed and then effortlessly kill it. This couldn't be a human. That wraps up this part of What If Reborn in Highschool DxD as a Lucifuge. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.